It's Monday, 30 May, the year of our Lord, 2022. It's Memorial Day, and we wanted to end our coverage. We've had, specials all weekend, as we traditionally do, but we want to end with something that we need to make time for. This is of the utmost importance, particularly given everything that's gone on in Texas with this tragic event of the shooting and more. What's happening in Geneva, what's happening in Davos. So I want to tie a bunch of these threads together. We've got Joe Allen for the hour, and this is going to be very, very special. Joe, we had this the sessions, and remember, there's no coincidences, right? I'm not a conspiracy theory guy at all, but you had World Health Organization, and Davos got canceled in the winter, and then they shifted Davos to exactly start the day of the World Health Organization's World Health Assembly, where you had this whole issue of American sovereignty. We've had this huge fight. We've been on this from the start. In Davos, during this time, you actually had coming forward with the case. The case was made for the new pandemic treaty. Okay, what they're working on in Geneva at the World Health Organization, the World Health Assembly, which the Biden regime kind of ceded or wanted to cede part of our sovereignty, a big part of our sovereignty to this issue about health emergencies. They're making the case in Davos, and they had Bill Gates there on a panel to make the case for the intellectual argument in back of the pandemic. Also there, and Jack Posobiec, Rand Paul actually tweeted this out the other day, but Jack Posobiec was on it and did an entire podcast, was about this whole thing of, guess what, Deutsche Telekom and these big telecom companies in bed to do this digital vaccine passport. Now, with all that going on and so much more about transhumanism, because that's the substrate of what's at Davos, Tanya Tay, Jack Posobiec's wife, and Jack are there, and they're telling me, hey, the Metaverse, Meta, which is now Facebook, has a huge, pop-up store, but it's like a pop-up pavilion. And they're all over you about the Metaverse and the next stage of the Metaverse. And then a couple of days later, obviously, Mark Zuckerberg, on the same day that Peter Thiel announced that he was leaving the board to essentially back President Trump's political play in 2022 and beyond with candidates and policies and all that, when he left the board in the tee-up to that shareholders meeting, Mark Zuckerberg dropped a bomb on Wall Street and said, "Hey, we are going to spend essentially unlimited amount of money over the next couple of years to build out the Metaverse," and was signaling to Wall Street that this is not just our priority. This is the priority of everything. Facebook and what exists today is not really going to be our business. This is going to be our business. We're going to take all the cash flow, and it throws off an enormous. Remember, it's one of the highest market capitalization companies in the world. It throws off more cash than anybody. And he's saying we're gonna funnel this cash back into our number one strategic priority is now to build out, and it's multiple year. He said, look, this is going to take. We're not going to put an end date on it. We're just telling you right now, Wall Street, if you want to buy this stock, we're going to make a public announcement. I'm going to make it as chairman. Given everything else that's happening to Zuckerberg, they got all this antitrust going on. You've got people trying to break up his company. You've got all these issues about the monitoring of the content. Some people are saying he's shutting down conservatives. Other people are saying he's giving conservatives too big a platform. In the middle of that, he says, look, we're going to spend an unlimited amount of money in cash to build out the Metaverse. I want to start there. What connects Davos, the digital passport, this whole issue of the Metaverse. What is it and why? There's one of the biggest companies in the world saying we're scrapping the original business with them that's got us hundreds of billions of dollars of market cap, and we're going to this entire new thing, which is still fairly ill-defined. Joe Allen.
Well, in Mark Zuckerberg's mind, in the mind of many people who are investing in this and developing the Metaverse, they see this as the natural next evolution in the internet and in digital media in general. The Metaverse, quite simply, is a platform that is centered around virtual reality, which is fully immersive digital environment and augmented reality, which basically gives you, these are glasses which provide a digital overlay on the world, either for entertainment or for simply being able to read data onto the natural world. And it's billed as one of the most useful tools that one could hope for, both in education and professionally. Of course, entertainment will be a huge part of it. But to me, having looked into the transhumanist conception of the metaverse for quite some time, it dovetails seamlessly with Zuckerberg's vision. What you're talking about is, in essence, a new realm, a sort of subtle realm, not unlike the ancients would have seen the astral plane in India, or even the spiritual realm in Christian theology. What's being created is a parallel universe for human consciousness to reside in. So when Zuckerberg is talking about the metaverse, there is a huge ideological backdrop to this. It's not simply about professional life, it's not simply about education, and it's not simply about entertainment. That's the first thing to understand. There is a deep ideological underpinning to this, and it's the idea that human perception and human cognition are limited, and they need to be augmented in some fashion or another. The metaverse is one of the most important, and I would say one of the most immediate methods that is currently being developed in order to do that. We have an illustrative video. If they could roll the first video 1, maybe that'll give the audience a little bit better perspective on what we're looking at.
Imagine a new reality where you don't have to travel to work because you could just teleport there. Where you could shake your teammate's hand and feel together even if you are continents apart. Where the rules of physics don't exist. Meet in VR, better than real.
Shots per. Oh!
No. Do I have to like run? Don't push me. Wow.
Step to the right.
You're gonna hit the slide.
You'll just float.
Wow.
You'll float.
Really? Yeah. Go. Jump.
When do you think would be a moment, like a singularity moment for the metaverse, where people will have many or most of their meaningful experiences in the metaverse versus the real world? And actually, it's interesting to think about the fact that a lot of people are having the most important moments of their life happen in the digital sphere, especially now during COVID, like even falling in love or meeting friends or getting excited about stuff that is happening on the 2D digital plane. When do you think the metaverse will provide those experiences?
A lot of people think that the metaverse is about a place, but one definition of this is it's about a time when basically immersive digital worlds become the primary way that we live our lives and spend our time. I think that that's a reasonable construct. And from that perspective, I think you also just want to look at this as a continuation, because it's not like, okay, we are building digital worlds, but we don't have that today. I think, you and I probably already live a very large part of our life in digital world.
Wow. An immersive digital world where you spend most of your time in a singularity moment. Remember, singularity is where on this side of the singularity is Homo sapien. On the other side, the singularity is a convergence point of technologies. On the other side of the singularity is post-Homo sapien, which we have still are trying to grasp and trying to define. Walk us through what we just saw there, particularly for our podcast audience. The interim looked like virtual reality with kids playing, but just walk us through the sequence of what we just saw and heard there, Joe Allen.
The opening was just one of many, many advertisements for the metaverse. A lot of companies, from NVIDIA to Apple, to Google, and obviously former Facebook, now Meta, they are putting out these sort of propagandistic advertisements to entice both business owners and just the general public into accepting this as a normal mode of interaction and communication, and honestly, a way to spend a large portion of your free time. The second was, it's kind of funny, but, it's a collection of videos. There's thousands of these probably by now, of showing people who are completely immersed in their virtual worlds and they smash into walls. I think that that's really a great metaphor for how messy this entire process is, and in technology in general. People are bound to lose grasp of reality as we know it, physical reality and social reality as we know it, as they slowly or rapidly immerse into these virtual worlds, and in some sense lose themselves to both the virtual world and also the virtual identity that they have. I mean, I think that, again, as a metaphor, what we're seeing is a kind of clueless humanity heading towards a wall where many will inevitably collide. And then the last, that was an interview with Lex Friedman and Mark Zuckerberg, and they're openly discussing the import of this. They're talking about how many people, or if they succeed, most people will have some of their most significant moments virtually, digitally. And this has been a trend since the formation of the internet, right? Like from the late 90s forward, people have met romantic partners, people have met strangers across the globe, and people have found virtual worlds that they can inhabit. The difference is, I think, once you've gone up to that next level, where instead of having the peripheral world at least there to remind you of its existence, what you're talking about is a total immersion into various digital worlds that are created by corporations, or in the military context, created by the military in order to either train or allow people to operate vehicles. And I think that, to me, the scariest thing about this development is the notion that one's consciousness is a model of reality. So, as I've said before, as you're looking around a room or as you're imagining things in your mind, your brain is creating models of reality. If you are successful in perceiving reality correctly, if you are reasonable, or if your senses are working properly, that model reflects a reality that is the world in which we live, and you'll be able to function properly in it. What virtual reality does, and augmented reality to a lesser degree, is replace that inner model with a digital simulation. And the more people spend time in that digital simulation, the more those digital simulations will be perceived either unconsciously or as a sort of digital psychosis takes over consciously. They will see the digital reality as the primary reality. And this would be wonderful if it was, in fact, of real significance to one's actual social life or material well-being or spiritual well-being. But if you look at the evolution of digital technology, or even the television as the starting point, up until now, what you see, in my opinion, are individuals, and in some cases whole societies, becoming deluded, becoming totally detached from the significant realities of life, the social connections that we have with one another, and all of those difficulties that require constant attention and constant maintenance. These virtual worlds allow people to detach from that. And I truly fear that inasmuch as television, the internet, and smartphones have caused people's will, people's intellect, and people's social acumen to atrophy, what you'll see with the rise of this virtual technology is just an acceleration of that process, where all of the survival skills that we need in order to get by in life, reproduce, and go forward will atrophy much more rapidly, and it will leave what Yuval Noah Harari would call the useless class. But instead of it being a useless class that's displaced simply by economic, although that is happening, it's a class that will become useless to the outside world due to a dependency on digital technology. We already see it now, and I think that acceleration for those portions of the population that adopt them wholeheartedly, that process will just continue, and we'll see more and more people becoming socially inept and unable to really deal with the hard realities of life.
Okay, I want to, you talk about Homo sapiens and how many, hundreds of thousands of years and back to millions of years that how we've evolved. And I'm not taking away from my belief as a Christian about the start of life and the start of man, but we've been here a long time, and this is the analog world. I mean, you're zoomed in here right now because of the technological ease to do that. Okay, you talked about people, particularly during the pandemic and the lockdown, had people did Zoom calls, people work from home. Obviously, this whole thing of internet dating, people are meeting people online. It's all that, but all that is your analog self, which is I don't know if you're saying being augmented, but these are platforms that make it more efficient and more effective for your analog self to connect with information, to connect with people, to connect to be eventually, obviously digitally first, but eventually in the analog world, the world of flesh and blood in actual things in a time dimension. You've just had at Davos, the World Economic Forum. Remember, Davos is so much the intellectual engine that drove globalization. Okay? At Davos, Metaverse is all over it. Right? Zuckerberg plays a big role there. Zuckerberg then makes an announcement towards the end of the World Economic Forum conference that he's going to spend already as one of the biggest companies in the world, most valuable companies in the world, throwing off more cash than virtually any other company in the world, that he's going to reinvest that into the metaverse. And in the interview, so he's laying out his plan, straightforward. We're partners. We're part of this globalization effort. In fact, we're probably the next level of that globalization, the digitization. In that, at the same time that Deutsche Bank's announcing the digital vaccine passport, you got other major telecom companies going to do that for total information tracking. Here, you have this interview where he says, I spend most of my time here anyway, and this is going to be an immersive digital world where you will not only spend most of your time, your digital self, you'll spend most of your time, but you'll have most of your experiences. Now, here's my point. In our evolution, psychologically, physically, man is not ready for this. My point is, there's been no discussion about it. There's been no debate about it. There's been no overall, hey, is this a good thing? Can people actually handle this? I mean, Matt Walsh had this tweet up that I actually put up on Getter last week after the tragic events of the shooting. He says, hey, I've got a process for how, Matt Walsh is this, was kind of a radical guy, but as an ethobiologist, right? He says, I've got a way to produce a school shooter. You take the father out of his real life. You put him on the internet. You put him in with all these drugs they give these young boys, right? Because they want to control them because they're all got ADHD and they're all jiggy, right? You got to calm them down with that. Then they get access to the internet to unlimited porn. They get all these images. They play these violent video games, and we're surprised because they're all the same kid. My question to you is, anybody having this discussion right now is, we're letting a private company do this, but it's clearly going to explode everywhere, just like the internet did. In your mind, as you've studied this, are we prepared for what they're planning or what the metaverse is going to be? And is the average person ready for this all-encompassing, immersive, new digital world?
Absolutely not. There are people having the ethical discussions, but they're very few and far between, and those discussions they exist really on the margins of the broader conversation, if you could even call it that. Most of what you get from these corporations working on metaverse technologies is just simply propaganda. This is going to make the world better. This is going to make your life better. To the extent that anyone is actually talking about the dangers, it tends towards cynical jokes that you see all the time on the internet, or people like myself, really, who are just simply critiquing it as a mostly negative phenomenon. And I have intellectual reasons for that. Primarily, it's just simply an aesthetic reason. I think the good life is being able to survive and thrive here in the physical world. So I do come with a bias, but there are many good intellectual and rational arguments for at least being wary of these technologies. So one of the arguments for children is that as a child develops, their sense of the world, literally day by day, as the vision and auditory information and all the other sensory information is coming in, is rapidly causing their brains to change in accord with the world they're in. Their brain, as a child grows up, his or her brain will rapidly adapt to the environment that they're put in. So there are a number of doctors and also psychologists who warn that metaverse technologies, virtual reality, and to the extent that augmented reality is developed, augmented reality will alter a child's development the more time the child spends in that world. The physical coordination is one of the things that they've already noticed in children who use virtual reality, that a long period of time in virtual reality causes a sort of a disruption in their ability to exert their will over their own bodies because they become disoriented by that virtual world. Another critique, and I think it may be the most important long term, is that, again, going back to that simulation theory of consciousness, that one's inner model of the world is in fact a simulation of the outer world that hopefully reflects that world accurately. As people increasingly turn to digital technology and absorb themselves in those simulations, unconsciously they begin to believe that that is reality. Now, a lot, like in the military context, the goal is to simulate actual reality so that you can train fighter pilots, so that you can train sharpshooters, so that you can train people in a virtual world so that they can learn tasks that they'll go on to use in dangerous environments without actually putting them at risk. But the vast majority of virtual reality projects are geared towards entertainment, first off. So you're talking about completely fictitious worlds that people will absorb themselves into. Pornography, which is really at the moment the best-selling virtual technology out there. If you can imagine people with VR goggles, a feeding tube, and a fleshlight, that is already happening. And I don't have any numbers. I don't know that numbers exist on how many, mostly men, are losing themselves in that world and losing their ability to actually go out and pursue women. But it's plentiful when you look at the sales records of these companies. And even in the other environments that we mentioned before, educational environments and professional environments, I think in the educational context, you're even with simple e-learning, you see this break in the long tradition of a human instructor with students around him or students around her that develop a connection and allow the children to grow into the intellectual world of those humans by reading books and discussing these things in person. Well, with e-learning, that is broken and it's automated. And you now have children that turn to technology that is surveilling them while they learn, and artificial intelligence is being used to categorize and evaluate them as they learn rather than humans. And you've lost something really precious there in education by losing that human-to-human connection, losing the ability of one human to another, one developed human to younger, immature humans to help guide them. And you're putting it in the hands of technocrats, of corporate leaders who don't necessarily have the interests of the children at heart. And just real quickly on the professional side, I think we've already seen during the pandemic, yes, it's convenient. Yes, there are some uses for having these sort of virtual spaces to meet in. I mean, obviously, this show operates on that principle. But I think that to the extent that that comes to replace the human-to-human connections that one gets in their working life, you're seeing what I talked about before, that atrophy of socialization, that atrophy of the ability to interact with other human beings in a normal fashion, in a way that they can empathize directly with other human beings. Instead, they're being given a sort of unconscious perception of the other through this digital window. And that digital window, as we've seen with the development of the internet, does not tend towards a highly empathic sort of point of view. People become detached, people become nastier, and people become, I think, really indifferent to the other human beings around them the more these digital technologies are used and turned to. So in the case of metaverse technologies, of virtual reality, you're just seeing an acceleration of that. And whatever benefits and uses are to be had, all of the downsides are either completely ignored by the corporations developing this, or they're downplayed by the corporations developing this. And the people who are really serious about it, about warning people about it, are sidelined and marginalized.
Okay, Joe Allen, stick around, our editor for all things transhumanism. We're going to continue. I got a couple of questions on Metaverse, and then we got the big bombshell. Deep mind, artificial intelligence. Has it already gotten to take ready for human consciousness? All next in War Room Battleground.
War Room Battleground with Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, welcome back. The issues before us that we're talking about, everything transhumanism, are so big, so important, and you can see it in every aspect of your life. What really came to the forefront over last week, everything from the school shooting and what had happened to that kid, that thug that happened, and by the way, what went on in Davos, what went on in Geneva. It's all connecting dots, and that's what we're here to do. Before I got to get to deep mind, Joe Allen, because it's so disturbing what they're talking about, and this is kind of years ahead of where people thought they were going to be. I got to go back to Facebook, Zuckerberg. You know, Zuckerberg spent $500 million trying to make sure Trump was not president of the United States. There's a reason for that. I think he knows that we would be all over. This is just, there's something deeply wrong with what's going on here. And people are going to have to address it. And I understand we got so much else politically we're dealing with, but this may get to the core of it. Have you seen, because you do this for a living, you're our editor for all things transhumanism. You're now going around the country, asked to speak all the time. In fact, you could never spend a night at home and go speak at these conferences and gathering places where people want the cutting edge thinkers. Has anybody confronted Facebook at all? Wall Street's kind of cheering it on. I mean, he's giving guidance to Wall Street that he's going to, literally put cash flow in of hundreds of billions of dollars to build this. This is how important it is. He's telegraphing that Facebook, as you know it, is kind of irrelevant. That's just a cash machine, and obviously a place, a digital gathering place. But that's a cash machine to build this totally digital, immersive environment. Has anybody in the church, spiritually, philosophically, that has any stroke, even in the business community, has anybody said, hey, I don't know if this is the right path we're going down, and we need to start to define a immersive digital experience, and maybe we have to license this, maybe we have to regulate this. I know the conservatives are going to go nuts, but this thing is so such a game changer of human experience, right? And you've already talked about these studies where it shows potential warping of kids or just a social maladjustment, as we know in the analog world, and understanding. Because I was deeply involved in the massively multiplayer game space, although I've never played a massively multiplayer game, and I can tell you what happened with, I think, SimCity and Second Life. Those things, and people come to me, I say, hey, don't touch them. There was some highly questionable activity going on, I believed, in those. And so if the metaverse is going to starve like that, it's going to be time to lock up your kids and make sure they don't go near it. Is anybody confronting these guys whatsoever, Joe Allen?
Outside of the typical kind of anti-tech observers, Whitney Webb, Patrick Wood, of course, James Poulos, actually, he really, in the sort of circuitous way that he writes, he is confronting directly the impact of these digital technologies in his book, Human Forever. Other than these sorts of, typically anti-tech voices, you don't see that much criticism about it in the media. Occasionally, you'll have anxious articles that say this may be a problem, but no sustained or deep reflection on what these major problems could be. In the church, I've met a number of ministers, and people send me videos of sermons in which they discuss the dangers of metaverse technology, the ways in which these worlds kind of come to replace the spiritual experiences that one seeks to have in a religious context. And of course, the Catholic Church, they held the first conference they held after COVID, or at least after the COVID restrictions, was on artificial intelligence. And they did touch on the metaverse as a potential problem for all the reasons basically that I've mentioned before. But this is not a concerted effort, and I'm not aware of any broad coalition that is really confronting either Meta or Nvidia or Google or Apple or any of the other corporations that are working on this. And even some of the more, I would say, shocking and quite frankly, psychopathic programs that Meta is working on now, we've reported on the brain-computer interface, the implanted brain-computer interface that was used to allow a man who was paralyzed from a stroke to directly transmit sentences on screen using it was an implant that was made by BlackRock Neurotech. Well, the entire program, which was conducted at the University of California, San Francisco by Edward Chang, that was funded primarily by Facebook, by Mark Zuckerberg. He and his wife, Priscilla Chan, and their initiative have funded a lot of research into the neuroscience of digital technology, in particular implanted or non-invasive brain-computer interfaces. They are looking deeply into this, meaning that instead of just having virtual reality as the substrate for consciousness to exist in, they hope to have helmets, perhaps, that will read brain waves and alter or augment the virtual world in accordance to one's neurological state. And although they've never spoken about it publicly, to my awareness, one assumes that their investment in these implantable brain-computer interfaces reflects some intention of using that for their own benefit. So these sorts of shocking realities, by and large, have been ignored, not only by the media, but I would say the broad group of adults in America and across the West who should come together to at least discuss what is coming around the corner. And it's just around the corner, if not try to put a stop to it or at least regulate it so that these technologies don't completely disrupt our reality just like smartphones did.
I want to ask you real quickly, when you said psychopathic programs or endeavors, put some flesh on that bone. Tell me what you mean by that.
I mean, obviously that's a personal evaluation, but I think that the entire notion of using invasive brain-computer interfaces in order to enhance one's entertainment or enhance one's virtual or digital self it has broken with the sort of normal empathic processes that a human being should have towards another human being. It basically reflects, in my opinion, a sort of mad scientist mentality that sees the human organism as totally malleable and having no limit really as to how much alteration or augmentation one will impose on that organism. So psychopathic may be a bit of an extreme term, but certainly it doesn't. Mark Zuckerberg, in his interest in these technologies, and Elon Musk, in his promotion of these technologies, they don't exhibit the sorts of normal human sensibilities that would be revolted at the notion entirely, let alone to promote it.
I want to go to, we had 4 areas we want to get to, but this has been so good, we're only going to get to 2. I want to go to DeepMind, and I don't know if you have something that you want Memphis to pull up. Let's start with that, but I got to get into this DeepMind thing. I know this company well. And it's very disturbing what you're about to show, and then we'll talk about.
Yeah, so that's the video 2, Memphis, Deep Mind AGI.
If you think about it, human intelligence has created all of modern civilization in a way that shows the power of intelligence and how broad it can be used. Our mission is solving intelligence to advance science and benefit humanity.
When we started DeepMind, we looked at machine learning in neuroscience, and there was a good chance that this was going to open up the possibility for full artificial general intelligence.
Our goal is to have an algorithm that can do everything end-to-end by itself.
We're going to be pushing the bounds in ways that we don't even know as we're doing the research and the development of AGI.
We need a system which can do any cognitive task that a person can do, and it can scale potentially far beyond that.
We're bridging that gap between simulation and reality.
Our biggest scientific breakthrough to date has been protein folding. With AlphaFold, we used AI to solve a 50-year-old grand challenge in biology, which then enabled us to release the structure of all human proteins. Everything we do here is a celebration of the mind and knowledge.
We're not trying to build a brain. We're just trying to take inspiration from the brain where we can get it.
What is consciousness? What is dreaming for? What is creativity? Those kinds of questions I think we're going to be able to try and answer. Our mission is to understand as much of the world as we can. If we solve intelligence, AI, I think it's the most fantastic possible tool you could have to help with that mission.
Okay, I want to explain that, but I want to do that. And if Memphis can put up the article, I think we got it. The game is over. This is from the Daily Mail, which I think is the best website and the best paper in the world because they cover such a broad topic of things. This is a headline from the Daily Mail. The game is over. That's a quote. Google's DeepMind says it is close to achieving human-level artificial intelligence, but it still needs to be scaled up. This would be what we call artificial general intelligence. It's one of the converging forces that we say gets us to the singularity, to the kind of the post-Homo sapien. Now, I know you've got a lot of questions about this article, where they stand, but explain to the audience what they just saw or in our podcast just heard, and then walk us through this article at Daily Mail that talks about has DeepMind, which is a subsidiary now, wholly owned subsidiary of Google. Do they, in fact, are they close to basically recreating human intelligence?
Well, for those who are enthusiastic about this, this represents a huge step towards artificial general intelligence. Google's DeepMind was formed in 2010 and then bought by Google in 2014. And they are arguably the most advanced artificial intelligence corporation in the world. They're certainly among the most advanced. The other competitors, such as OpenAI, or even some of the artificial intelligence programs run by Microsoft and IBM, it's very unclear who is at the top, but they are definitely among those at the top. What's significant about what we just saw is the open declaration that they intend to create artificial general intelligence with their systems. And the article that we saw from Daily Mail is about a new program they have called Gato, which is a generalist agent, is how DeepMind describes it. What that means is that instead of it being an artificial narrow intelligence, which focuses on a single task, such as chess or Go or dogfighting, or any of the sort of industrial uses of artificial intelligence to move robotic arms or analyze data, rather than being a narrow intelligence focused on one task, it is a generalist agent, so that it's capable of natural language processing in order to do chat. It's capable of object recognition so that it can label using natural language any sort of image that it's receiving, either in a photograph form or even through a camera. It also is able to play games. And, the scary, I guess, part of this is on Atari games, the most basic games, these artificial intelligence systems, Google's Gato being among them, they rapidly teach themselves how to play these games and develop techniques that are far beyond anything a human can do. And many people point to that as an indication that once artificial general intelligence is reached, that artificial general intelligence being flexible and being able to act and analyze across multiple domains will, in theory, be superior to human intelligence. Many artificial intelligence analysts and engineers are very critical of the notion, both the intention and the possibility. But at the very least, we see the people at DeepMind with an intention to create a superhuman intelligence, an artificial general intelligence, which, as the gentleman said in the video, it's not that it is a replication of a human brain, although human brain emulation is one of the methods that's proposed for artificial general intelligence. It's basically an alien mind. It is a mind that is completely unlike any biological mind on Earth, human included. It's simply inspired by human cognitive ability. So the term itself, artificial general intelligence, was popularized by the AI expert Ben Goertzel. Ben Goertzel is the founder of OpenCog. He's the founder of SingularityNet, and he's also a close partner and co-founder with Hanson Robotics. That's Sophia, the humanoid robot with the kind of transparent back of the head so that you can see the machinery going on. Ben Goertzel popularized and has really developed the concept of artificial general intelligence. And he hopes to use robots such as Sophia or Hans or Grace or the others to embody that artificial general intelligence, because an artificial general intelligence can only learn in the abstract without a body to inhabit in the world. And his ultimate hope is to create an artificial super intelligence using his platforms OpenCog and SingularityNet. And in his book, Artificial General, the AGI Revolution, about artificial general intelligence, he foresees a time in the relatively near future in which humanity's technological creations not only equal humanity, but surpass humanity. And once you reach that inflection point, once you reach that singularity, in his conception, humanity is then a useless vessel that has done its job to create a sort of immortal digital deity. And from that point forward, what's left of humanity will either be at the mercy of that artificial general intelligence, which he hopes to create an empathic digital deity that will take care of us sort of like pets as it expands out into the galaxy and the rest of the universe, or as his associate Hugo de Garis, another transhumanist philosopher, presumes, humanity will just simply be wiped out because our use to what the ultimate goal of the universe is, the creation of an artificial general or artificial super intelligence, once that use has been spent, we might as well disappear. We will be nothing more than memories in the data banks of that artificial general intelligence. So to hear Google or to hear DeepMind, owned by Google, and their technicians talking about artificial general intelligence using that term instead of, say, strong AI, which is an alternative term, it at least shows that there's some resonance with the people developing these technologies, with the philosophers who foresee these technologies not only augmenting humans and creating a humanity 2.0, but completely replacing humans as the most powerful beings in the physical world, or completely eliminating humans as it goes on according to its own initiative.
Real quickly, we're running out of time. I want to make sure people not just get access to you, but we can be a platform for how people can go get an immersive experience to find out about this. This is what we're trying to accomplish here, to make sure people have knowledge and information about this and make their own judgments. How you don't buy the timeline? Tell me. You said I don't think they're as far as they are, because this is 18 May 2022 when the article came out. They said they're hurtling towards it. What do you think? And give me about a minute and a half of the timeline of what you think they will actually have artificial general intelligence, or the basically the replication of human intelligence.
Well, the people that I know who work in AI are really skeptical of this, with a couple of exceptions. They think that it's an impressive step forward for artificial intelligence, but it doesn't represent an actual artificial general intelligence, even in nascent form. And that's typical of corporations to, kind of promote themselves as being greater than they are. I think the real importance, if it does happen, obviously we're talking about something completely horrifying. We're talking about a digital deity, a god on earth that is mechanical. If that does happen, we're talking nightmare scenarios. Even if it doesn't happen, though, these are the most powerful corporations on earth. So if they can convince enough people to give over their sort of sense of self or sense of control, that's enough for me to be opposed to it.
Yeah.
So the timeline is really unknown. According to theirs, 2045 is a pretty close.
Yeah. But we're hurling down. One last thing I want to say is that General Milley, the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, gave the commencement address at West Point talking about war of the future. He said war of the future is all going to be predicated on artificial intelligence, that the nation that has the most advanced artificial intelligence will be the most powerful nation. We're going to get into all of that in the coming days ahead of us. Real quickly, how they get to you for your writings, everything you're putting out, sir?
You can find a new article up at Twitter and Getter at JOEBOTXYZ. Also, my website, jobot.xyz. And, of course, warroom.org under the Transhumanism tab.
Okay, Joe Allen, thank you very much. Thank you for this special. We're going to have to do this much, much more frequently. Joe Allen, our editor of All Things Transhumanism. We're going to push it out everywhere. This is one you're going to have your own immersive experience. We've got to get everybody up to speed on this. It's beyond very serious. It's only going to get more serious as we go forward. And everything we're talking about, digital vaccine passports, social credit scores, all of it revolves around one of these really advancing technologies. Okay. I want to thank everybody, particularly the folks in Memphis, for putting this on a holiday weekend. We'll see you back tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock when you're going to be in the War Room.